right, welcome back to another edition of We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. We bring you today's labor news, history, and analysis from the U.S. and around the world. This is a podcast you listen to with your fellow workers organizing on the shop floor. This is a podcast you listen to before walking into your union meeting. As always, I'm Rico Rutia, here with my co-host, Brian Pfeiffer. In today's episode, we offer a small list of all the different types of protests, labor actions, and mass convergences that have been carried out in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Since October, the U.S. has seen protesters occupy buildings, participate in sit-ins, shut down highways, disrupt the lives of politicians and business leaders, all in solidarity with the Palestinian people. We also catch up with labor news as it relates to Amazon, Starbucks, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, and Tesla in Sweden. But first, as always, we like to kick things off with a little bit of culture. Today's song is Somos Sur by an artist named Anatijo. Last name is spelled Tijous. Somos Sur means we are the South, as in people of the global South. And my favorite line in the song reads as follows. Fuera Yankee de América Latina, franceses, ingleses y holandeses. Yo te quiero libre Palestina. Which translates to Yankee, get out of Latin America, along with the French, the British, and the Dutch. Palestine, I want you free.
Tú nos dices que debemos sentarnos, pero las ideas solo pueden levantarnos, caminar, recorrer, no rendirse ni retroceder, ver, aprender como esponja, absorber. Nadie sobre todos, faltan todos, suman todos para todos, todo para nosotros. Soñamos en grande que se caiga el imperio, lo gritamos algo, no queda más remedio. Esto no es utopía, es alegre rebeldía del baile de los que sobran de la danza tuya mía. Levantarnos para llevar. Ni África ni América Latina se suba. Con barro, con casco, con lápiz a patear el fiasco. Provocar un social terremoto en este charco.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's edition of We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. And in this edition, we wanted to cover some of the pro-Palestinian actions that have taken place since October 7th worldwide. Here's just a few, and Brian's also going to cover some of them for us. At the University of Michigan, activists occupied the building where University President Ono works and refused to leave. Protesters also blocked traffic for a U of M versus Ohio football game. Protesters have occupied Grand Central Station in New York City. More than 300,000 people shut down the Brooklyn Bridge a couple of weeks ago. Activists shut down Lakeshore Drive in Chicago and other major transportation arteries since October 7th. Union workers shut down shipments briefly in Oakland and Tacoma. There was also a vehicle caravan of over 100 vehicles on the freeway in Milwaukee on November 24th. Brian's also going to share some of the things that he's observed as well.
Yes, Rick. Student protests continue nationwide, led by Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, and other student organizations, from occupations to rallies to die-ins. There will be a die-in this Wednesday from 11:30 a.m. onward at UW-Madison, Bascom Hill. And that is actions like that are happening all over the country. Hundreds of thousands marched in numerous actions in London in the past few weeks. Cuba and Palestinian flags are projected together on the monument in Revolution Square in Havana. Union workers continue many actions across the world, including stopping shipments destined for Israel in Spain and other locations. Millions have marched in the Middle East and Asia and all over the world. Millions. Mass supports in Africa with millions there on the continent participating in protest actions for Palestine. The African National Congress has lent major support for Palestine, diplomatically and otherwise. Mass support of soccer games with fans flying Palestinian flags in Ireland and many other locations. Drive-through, car caravans, etc., as you mentioned, Rick, continue to happen. In Milwaukee this last Friday, in addition to the one you mentioned on the freeway, pro-Palestinian activists supported workers at Starbucks and also protested the company owners' support of Zionist Israel. So continuing from this, our great brother, Mumia Abu Jamal, who's been illegally locked out in prison, first on death row and now in general population for well over 4 decades. Mumia Abu Jamal is a political prisoner, journalist, scholar, and also a union member. He's a steadfast union supporter and a steadfast supporter of Palestine, going back to his days in the Black Panther Party when he was an editor of the Black Panther Party newspaper and a journalist in Philadelphia. These days, he's doing a lot of writing and also be a commentator for prisonradio.org. That's prisonradio.org. In a November 1, 2023 commentary called War Against the Fleas, Brother Mumia Abu Jamal states in part, quote, "What most U.S. news agencies are loath to address is the realm of international law, especially when one considers the law of occupied territories and the right of the occupied to resist their occupation by any means necessary. The Palestinians are the indigenous people of the region. They are thus equivalent to the Navajo, Apache, and Seminoles of the West, subjected to the settler colonialism of the invaders. It is they who have a right to exist. Is that not so? The indigenous of the U.S. were sent to the worst lands available, so-called reservations. The Palestinians have been ghettoized, walled off by walls that violate international law, humiliated and subjected to a century of dispossession and military repression." And Brother Mumia concludes in his commentary, quote, "Their decades of negotiations have led to nothing but more of the same. They want what all people want, freedom with love, not fear." This is Mumia Abu Jamal. And that was a commentary by Brother Mumia Abu Jamal from prisonradio.org. And listeners can go to prisonradio.org to listen to commentaries by Mumia, but also other prisoners who are workers as well. The United Electrical Workers helped initiate a labor call for ceasefire in Israel and Palestine in October. And this was initiated by a call by Palestinian trade unions, as well as the World Federation of Trade Unions, among other unions across the world. And we would like to read here the entire call, so listeners have a feel for what the call is, and you can go to the UE website to sign the call and download that and circulate that in your given unions and or other worker organizations. It begins, quote, "We, members of the American labor movement, mourn the loss of life in Israel and Palestine. We express our solidarity with all workers and our common desire for peace in Palestine and Israel, and we call on President Joe Biden and Congress to push for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the siege of Gaza. We cannot bomb our way to peace. We also condemn any hate crimes against Muslim, Jews, or anyone else. In issuing this call, U.S. unions are joining the efforts of 13 Congress members and others who are calling for an immediate ceasefire." The call goes on, quote, "The basic rights of people must be restored. Water, fuel, food, and other humanitarian aid must be allowed into Gaza. Power must be restored, and foreign nationals and Palestinians requiring medical care must be allowed out of Gaza." Goes on to say, "There must be a ceasefire in Gaza. The cycle of violence must stop so that negotiations for an enduring peace proceed. The U.S. must act. We call on President Biden to immediately call for a ceasefire. The road to justice cannot be paved by bombs and war. The road to peace cannot be found through warfare. We commit ourselves to work in solidarity with the Palestinian peoples to achieve peace and justice. Union members come from diverse backgrounds, including Jews, Muslims, and Middle Eastern communities. The rising escalation of war and arms sales doesn't serve the interests of workers anywhere. In the end, we all want a peace to call home and for our children to be safe. Working people around the world want and deserve to live free from the effects of violence, war, and militarization. Thousands of Americans have joined the groundswell of global solidarity, demanding a ceasefire now. It is the labor movement's turn to make our voices heard and demand a ceasefire. Together, we can stand for peace, justice, and a better future for working people everywhere. And listeners can go to ueunion.org. That's ueunion.org. This call can be signed there, and it can be circulated there and shared off of the UE website. In following up with this, the labor support that is increasing to grow in the world, there is a December 9th, 2023 statewide rally and march for Palestine in Madison, Wisconsin, and labor is a part. There will be a labor delegation as part of this. But this is a historic development, the first ever statewide pro-Palestine march in state history, many believe, in Madison, Wisconsin. Those demanding an immediate U.S.-Israeli ceasefire and an end to apartheid will rally in March in Madison on December 9th. A variety of actions in Wisconsin have been taking place since October 7th in support of Palestinians facing unrelenting genocidal bombing and other war crimes, such as intentional starvation by the U.S. and Israel. The Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine, with now over 50 organizations statewide, has been leading and or supporting numerous actions in Wisconsin, including marches, disruptions of politicians' events, vigils, and vehicle caravans. Many workers and many union workers have been helping to organize and are participating. On December 9th and another first, during the rally and the march, a Labor for Palestine contingent, as well as a speaker at the rally, will participate and march in Madison. Union members are taking the lead in organizing this contingent, and there will be labor banners and signs and members wearing their respective union gear. The December 9th event will begin at 1 p.m. at the state capitol in Madison and will be followed by a march that will include stops with speakers linking the Black freedom struggle, the indigenous and Arab Muslim anti-colonial struggles, and Palestinian liberation struggles. Union members exposing corporations in the state that make products and weapons for Israel, and queer speakers supporting Palestine. For more information, listeners can go to Instagram at WISCOFORPALI. That's WISCOFORPALI on Instagram, or email wisco4pally@gmail.com. That's WISCOFORPALI@gmail.com. And that is for the December 9th statewide march and rally for Palestine in Madison, Wisconsin. All right, Rick, what do you got today?
Right on, Brian. Thank you for that. You know, I've been following the Palestinian struggle and been attending protests and demonstrations and stuff like that for almost 25 years now. And honestly, I haven't seen anything on the scale of the level of protests that are happening right now. You know, I've seen mass convergences happen in a day. Most notably, I can think back on Washington, D.C., right around 2000, when there was a huge protest in D.C., but never anything as relentless as this, just kind of seeping into other social movements, seeping into universities so deeply. You know, this is this historic time to see everything happening as far as the protests and solidarity with the Palestinian people and the labor activism, the labor organizing, the strikes that are happening right now. And people are starting to connect these dots, you know, so these are really interesting times to see people calling for boycotts of, for instance, Starbucks, both because their workers are unionizing and the corporation isn't recognizing it or refusing to bargain, and at the same time calling for a boycott of Starbucks because it sells coffee in occupied Palestine. So these are historic times, and we will keep you in the loop as to what's going on. But yeah, personally, after 25 years of following this, I've never seen anything like this. So although grim, I hope that these times can help to radicalize people rather than lead them to despair, because a lot of stuff is happening and people just, they're not taking it anymore. You know, these levels, this level of protest and the types of protests, the occupations, the stopping traffic, the soccer games. These are next level from what I've ever seen, at least here in the U.S. So we will continue to be covering that. On my plate this week, I would like to talk about a union that we have actually never talked about here on We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. We're going to talk about the UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers. And the reason this came on the episode today was because I came across an op-ed piece on truthout.org. The name of the piece is "A Wave of Progressive Reform is Sweeping Through Big Unions. Is the UFCW next?" And the byline reads, "For too long, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union has been missing in action for its essential workers." And you can find this article online by Googling the name, but where I'd like to pick up is actually on the third paragraph down, and then I'm going to skip around a little bit, but this is all from that one article. So here we go. "In far too many locations and for far too many young people, the legacy of the giant National Supermarket Workers Union, the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, is sadly one of a business union that remains missing in action for its essential members." Now, let me just pause there for a second, just in case you're tuning in or you're new to this. When they talk about business unionism, they're talking about a style of unionism that just focuses on bread and butter issues. So money, wages, days off, holidays, stuff like that. Just bread and butter issues, no remnants of social movement unionism. So they're not connecting the struggle to the queer liberation struggle or the Black liberation struggle or anything like that. It's just pure bread and butter issues. Process the contract or negotiate the contract, process the grievances if there's a violation of the contract, and focus only on that. So that's what they mean by that. Okay, now moving on with the article. "Although UFCW has many progressive locals, it's a complex organization dominated nationally by a culture of collaboration with its members' employers, dating back to the series of mergers that made it into one of the largest labor organizations in the United States with 1.2 million members. Formed in the 19th century, the Amalgamated Meat Cutters and Butcher Workmen, AMC, absorbed several other unions, including the United Leather Workers International Union in 1951, International Fur and Leather Workers Union in 1955, the National Agricultural Workers Union in 1960, and the United Packing House Workers of America in 1968. In 1979, the more progressive AMC merged with the Retail Clerks International Union to form the United Food and Commercial Workers. Sadly, the more conservative culture of the retail clerks, which largely favored employers, dominated the merger. For many years after the merger, the union president was William Wynn, who was far more famous for his gold bracelets and bling than his leadership of workers." Brian, I'm just going to pause there for a second, and this just reminds me of a lesson I took away from Detroit. Listeners, if you didn't know already, but I have shared that, when I lived in Detroit, I was close with the labor notes circles. And I was in the labor notes office and knew the staff, was friends with the staff, was just involved with labor notes, I should say. And one of the people who was there in the office at that time was Kim Moody, one of the original founders of Labor Notes, also a writer for Labor Notes and an author of several labor-related books. And I'll never forget that, one of the first things that he taught me was whenever we have these mergers, it's usually a much more conservative union gobbling up a radical union. And it's the smaller, more radical unions usually have their politics watered down as a result of that. So this article is just speaking to that lesson that I picked up in Detroit. So moving along with the article. Still, UFCW has great potential to be a powerful force in the supermarket industry. It has about 850,000 grocery workers nationwide and contracts with two industry giants, Kroger and Albertsons, presently seeking to merge. The good news is that reform is in the air for the United Food and Commercial Workers. When 1,200 delegates convened in Las Vegas last April for the UFCW Constitutional Convention, there were two new groups seeking change: a genuine reform movement called UFCW Meet the Moment consisting of a handful of large union locals and a new nonprofit educational fund, Essential Workers for Democracy. Supporters of Meet the Moment presented resolutions calling for a one-member, one-vote election of officers that both the Teamsters and the recently reformed United Auto Workers members have achieved. United Food and Commercial Workers currently elects its top officers through locally elected delegates who all too often are also beholden to the status quo. Meet the Moment reformers also called for opposition to Kroger-Albertsons merger, coordinated national supermarket bargaining, and aggressive retail organizing. UFCW did finally oppose the Kroger-Albertson merger and voted to trigger strike pay in the first week of a walkout, but one member, one vote did not go anywhere, and there was no serious plan for mass organizing. In almost every case, opposition to the latter two reforms was led by paid staff and officers who told convention delegates why the status quo was just fine. You know, that sounds terribly familiar to me. Full disclosure, I did work at the United Food and Commercial Workers for 3 months. It was the most, frankly, bureaucratic, top-down, undemocratic, union that I've ever been a part of. I won't lie, and I can't hold back on it. You know, at that time, I was representing workers in the meatpacking industry who were making right around $14, $15 an hour. And the leadership of the United Food and Commercial Workers here in Denver, Colorado, was making anywhere from $90,000 to $125,000 to $150,000 for the president. And yeah, you know, I couldn't help but to open my mouth up about that to the membership. And well, I did not last very long at that job. So, moving right along with this article, though, Essential Workers for Democracy, which is dedicated to making workers' organizations across the labor movement more democratic, tracked and published how every UFCW local union voted on these remaining reforms. Meet the Moment is led by Faye Gunther, president of Seattle Local 3000, the largest union in the entire international. Gunther is a longtime union organizer who has a vision for a national union governed more democratically by its members and aggressively organizes essential workers in retail and related sectors. Supporters of Meet the Moment recognize that the reform process is a long haul, and they are already strategizing about the 2028 convention in 5 years. In the interim, caucus members are pursuing more coordinated bargaining with their giant employers, more external organizing, and a major fight against the Kroger-Albertson merger. Many of those college students who had their first taste of unionism in a summer job at a supermarket and are now on the front lines of these retail organizing efforts. Trader Joe's in Hadley, Massachusetts has voted for an independent union, a sad reflection of the UFCW's dismal reputation. With new leadership, many of those workers' students have become partisan combatants in support of a reformed UFCW. After all, retail workers aren't attracted to a dues collection agency. They want to join a militant fighting union. Right on. Also worth mentioning is UFCW Local 3000 workers in Seattle recently went on strike this past Friday. Here's just a snippet from an article in The Guardian. The name of the article is Macy's Black Friday Strike, Washington State. Okay, if you want to look it up, but just a couple of snippets from there, a couple of briefs. After 400 Macy's workers in Washington State began striking on Friday, known as Black Friday, among retailers in one of the year's busiest shopping days, citing allegedly unfair labor practices and the retail giant's purported refusal to agree to a new contract. The union representing the employees, UFCW 3000, said workers started arriving around 3 a.m. on Friday to form picket lines. Workers are striking outside of Alderwood, South Center, and Bellis Fair Macy's stores and plan to continue for 3 days. So that's the update from the United Food and Commercial Workers. And now, moving right along, an article from Fortune magazine. And I just want to point out that it's Fortune magazine, still in the spirit of the episode that we did about conspiracy theories. And that's just to say, again, you know, Elon Musk The billionaires, the capitalists, the owners, they put themselves on the cover of these magazines, Money Magazine, Business Week, Fortune Magazine, all these magazines, they put themselves on the cover. So there's no need for conspiracy theories. And this Fortune Magazine kind of speaks to the spirit of that. The name of the article is Elon Musk brands Sweden's union, quote unquote, insane after strikes cripple Tesla operations, but caving to any demands may open the floodgates in the US and Germany. Honestly, I think everything is said in the title of that article, because here you have Fortune Magazine essentially saying, this organizing in Sweden may open the floodgates to more organizing within Tesla. And I think when you look back on the UAW strike that just happened and how it caught the attention of Tesla workers and how they organized an organizing committee, I think there's some serious weight to that. I think there's some serious truth to that. So moving right along to the Fortune Magazine article, and mind you, this is written by Fortune Magazine. So, I'll make a couple of notes as we run through it, but this is what the article states. Organized labor ranks among Elon Musk's least favorite things, right up alongside Wall Street short sellers and mainstream media. The world's wealthiest man built Tesla into the industry's dominant automaker despite what he believes has been fierce opposition from all three. Yet it is his steadfast refusal to play ball with trade unions that is his biggest headache of late. Only weeks after labor leader Sean Fain threatened to raise working conditions at Tesla with the help of the United Auto Workers, Sweden's own industrial union, IF Metal, that's metal with two L's, is bringing the company's operations to a complete standstill in the Scandinavian country. It's the first time that Tesla's operations have been hit by a strike. This is insane, quote unquote, the entrepreneur grumbled. Now, what is that, Brian? Like, this is insane. The entrepreneur grumbled. Like, what are we writing some children's book here? The entrepreneur grumbled. I'm sorry. The article moves on. Sweden is a major destination for Tesla cars, vying with the Netherlands as the fourth largest market for electric vehicles in the European Union after Germany and France. More than 90,000 electric vehicles have been sold through October, according to the industry's own data. More specifically, Sweden punches way above its weight when it comes to electric vehicle adoption, where it is currently the undisputed EU leader. Nearly 39% of all new cars sold in the Scandinavian country are fully electric, triple the overall adoption rate in the EU through the first 10 months. It is by far the most popular powertrain choice among Swedes, with conventional gasoline-only cars only amounting to 52,000 during the first 10 months. As far as the tradition of collective bargaining, even though Stockholm enjoys a higher per capita number of tech startups valued at 1 billion plus in Stockholm than almost anywhere else in the world, the country still has a long tradition of collective wage bargaining. As a result, when Tesla refused to agree to a wage deal with 120 mechanics at 7 different workshops, IF Metal declared a strike in late October. This has since spiraled out of control as more unions have since joined in, including dock workers that now refuse to unload imported Tesla cars, arriving in ports, and even workers from state-owned postal service responsible for delivering license plates. In the short term, Musk can ill afford sales in a key market to dry up. Investors are becoming increasingly anxious as his company cannot maintain the breakneck speed of growth to which they have long become accustomed. On the other hand, giving in could have long-term implications, as he has thus far refused to play ball with unions. Any compromise in Sweden will likely only embolden labor leaders in the US and Germany to increase the pressure. We can agree with that much with this Fortune magazine article. Anytime workers are on strike and they're successful and other workers see that, be it in the same industry, same company, or same exploitations, those other workers are emboldened. So Fortune magazine, we can agree on that much. Responding to Musk's frustration, Sweden parliamentarian Annika Standhall corrected the centi billionaire. And this is a quote from that parliamentarian. Quote, "This is the Swedish labor market model agreed on since almost 100 years between employers and employees," she wrote. "In Sweden, all serious companies sign collective bargaining agreements." Interesting stuff happening there. And again, we will keep you updated, and we will keep you updated as far as any international acts that may happen between Tesla in California or the US and Tesla in Europe, because, you know, that's the spirit of internationalism that we cover here in We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for listening on another episode of We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. We will be back to you next week with more labor updates and more news updates. Thank you again, everyone. Solidarity and love to all. Have a good night.